So I'm sure by now that we're thinking, well, why do compounds exist? Why don't we just have CO2 on the periodic table? It's so much more common than uranium and plutonium. Why don't we just have CO2 on the periodic table? Well, let me explain just briefly why that is. So the periodic table is organized into periods. These are the rows that go down the periodic table. I'm sorry, columns that go down the periodic table. And starting at the far left with hydrogen and sodium, we start at 1, and we end all the way on the other side with helium and neon with 8. This number tells us how many outer electrons an element has. Every element wants to get to those 8 electrons in the outer shell because that means that it is now stable. It's now a happy element. Well, how do these elements share electrons? Well, they form little bonds with each other. When we have the carbon and the 2 oxygen come together and bond, the electrons are now happy. Or another great example is sodium and chlorine. Sodium has 1 electron in the outer shell, and chlorine has 7. So they want to get to 8. So what do? Well, the sodium decides, hey, chlorine, we can make a good team. Let's join forces and share our electrons and become a super stable element. So some elements already come with 8, and we call these elements noble gases. I like to think of them, the reason why they're called noble gases is because they think they're so much better than all the other elements, they don't need to interact with them at all. Because they don't interact, we call these inert. Noble gases do not bond, do not want to share their electrons with anyone else. Some examples of noble gases are helium, which we use to blow up balloons, and neon, which we use in really cool electrically lit signs. So that's a brief explanation as to why compounds exist. They exist so they can share electrons and be happy, be stable.